Hey everyone, it's Whimsy, your good boy with good vibes, and today I've got another deck for you. If you're just here for the deck list, I have left links to the Moxfield and Archidekt in the description below, so you can go check them out. For everyone else, I'll be spending the rest of this video breaking down the mechanics and themes that went into the deck, and I've made a little treat for everyone at the end. So let's take a walk. Magic the Gathering recently released a Final Fantasy set, and while they did represent the classic Final Fantasy job system with the job select equipment, they tended to be more focused on the characters and moments that made up each game rather than the exact mechanical identity of the jobs. So that's where I come in. We're going to put a Final Fantasy job under the microscope, see what makes it tick, and try to build a deck around it. For those of you new to the channel, I'll lay out the rules for this deck building challenge. Rule number 1. Each deck must contain at least one job select equipment if it's available. We may have to make a substitution down the line, but at time of recording, we have like 20 of these things to go through, so I think we'll be okay. Rule number 2. Each deck must contain at least one crystal card. If we build a mono blue deck, we have to put the water crystal in it, even if we're not playing a mill strategy. Rule number 3. Each deck must contain at least one summon card. We're gonna try to pick the best summon for each deck based on its actual themes and mechanics, instead of putting Bahamut in everything. Rule number 4. Play Final Fantasy cards. Now this does not mean that every commander has to be a Final Fantasy card, but it does mean that we're going to be using Final Fantasy variant art for a lot of cards wherever it makes sense. It also means we will be playing cards that maybe don't belong in the decks we're building, like Crystal of Altar Cave and Starting Town. You really don't need them for a single color deck, but it's vibes. We're doing this for the vibes. Rule number 5. No game changers. These are not budget decks, and we're not restricting ourselves to a specific bracket. However, when you have access to a card like Teferi's Protection, it is very hard to say no to putting it in every single deck that's in white. We are trying to go for some flavor wins and vibes here, so we're going to just cut ourselves off from game changers entirely in favor of coming up with some more creative solutions to our problems. Alright, with the rules out of the way, let's get started. Our deck today is the Warrior. For the casual RPG enjoyer, when I say warrior, you're probably thinking something like this. A weapon master skilled at putting the pointy end in the bad guy. Their arsenal often ranges from sword and shield to unga and bunga, and that would seem to hold true for the Final Fantasy series, but I think we can find some more depth here if we take a closer look, so let's dig in. The warrior in Final Fantasy I is very basic. It is the precursor to the knight, which would eventually morph into the paladin due to its use of white magic, and the warrior was basically worse than the knight in every way, so you'd want to upgrade it as soon as you got the rat's tail. In Final Fantasy III, when a lot of other jobs were busy getting upgrades and cool signature abilities, the warrior got literally nothing, once again relegated to the baseline fighter. We wouldn't see a real evolution of what a warrior could be until Final Fantasy IX, with the addition of swordplay abilities. Adalbert Steiner had a variety of techniques, including Minus Strike, which would deal damage based on how much health he was missing, in addition to a variety of break skills that would reduce your opponent's stats when you hit them. Final Fantasy X-2 and some other spin-off games would continue introducing warriors, soldiers, and fighters with these break skills, as well as some elemental damage. Though X-2 would introduce a new ability in Assault, which cast Berserk, Haste, Shell, and Protect on your entire party. Final Fantasy XI offered a different version of warrior. It was still a base job, focused mostly on weapons and armor. But due to the nature of it being an MMO, the warrior got a few more tools added to its kit, including Provoke, which would allow you to taunt enemies into attacking you, and Retaliation, which would allow you to counterattack when you got hit. And interestingly enough, this game shifts the focus from swords to great axes. They're still good with swords, but their best rating is in axes and great axes, which give them more of that berserker flair than they had before. Final Fantasy XIV borrowed heavily from Final Fantasy XI when it came to character design. The warrior in 14 is once again a melee fighter with a focus on tanking and wielding large axes. Their skills include Fell Cleave, Provoke, Fell Cleave, some healing, Fell Cleave, some reflecting damage, and Fell Cleave. So now that we've taken a look at most versions of Warrior in Final Fantasy, let's see how Wizards decided to interpret these characters. Our job select equipment is called Warrior's Sword, which makes a lot of sense, very classic, very warrior. Not too many bells and whistles, but it does give you significant boosts to attack and defense that most of the other job select weapons don't get. For our characters, we have Firion, Wild Rose Warrior, and Rauban, Bull of All Amigo, which have a nice focus on equipment and could help us build into that version of the warrior fantasy. Then we've got Cid, Estinian, and Kimahri, who are all dragoons. And hey, both versions of Terra are also listed as warriors for some reason. Listen, warrior is a broad term. It's so broad. Warriors are basically anybody who fights anybody else, right? So I think this is going to be difficult. We are trying to encompass several different versions of warrior that all kind of go in different directions. The one through line that I can find here is that they all have access to pretty significant weapons and armor throughout their games. So I think just like the Paladin, we want to have strong weapons and armor. However, since we're trying to translate so many other skills and abilities into this, I think we need to pick our weapons as we go to help support our other themes. So let's go back to our skills. The first time Warrior actually had any skills was with the introduction of the break attacks. Power Break reduces your opponent's strength when you hit them. What does that sound like to you? Because to me, it sounds like Wither. We can give all of our creatures Wither thanks to cards like Corrosive Mentor and Massacre Girl Known Killer, but we can also put Blightsickle on the list as an equipment. We are picking up Fist of the Demigod, which is a really cheap enchantment that gives black creatures Wither and red creatures First Strike. And of course, if your creature is both, they get both. I think the interaction between First Strike and Wither is so strong that I'm going to put a couple other sources of First Strike in our weapons category. So let's pick up Two-Handed Axe and Sword of Vengeance. The last card that I'm going to mention here is Glistening Oil. We did skip Infect for most of the deck, focusing on Wither, but Glistening Oil puts -1 counters on enchanted creature. You can enchant your opponent's creatures with this to weaken them or even take them out entirely, and it'll go back in your hand. The Infect helps us put -1 counters on other creatures, and it can help us win the game. So this is just a home run in this deck, I think. The Berserk status is a little bit of a tricky one. Infectious Rage is a really iconic card here. It allows us to reduce our defense to gain attack, just like some of the Berserk abilities that warriors have gained. It's also relatively cheap, comes back to the battlefield, and can clear out a bunch of smaller creatures at random. So it can do a lot of work, and it's pretty flavorful. So aside from that, what is Berserk? Because, I mean, if you think about it, it's just attacking. If you want a Berserker deck, you can just attack things. It's fine. You're allowed to do that. I think if we're going to focus on it mechanically, it needs to be forced attacks, and normally this would fall under Goad, but because we are a tank, and we have First Strike and Wither, we want to get into combat with creatures, so we want to force people to attack us whenever we can. There's only one card that does this, Trove of Temptation. Each opponent must attack you with at least one creature each combat if able. It also gives you a treasure token, which is nice icing on the cake, but that is not why we're playing it. Another card that can force combat with creatures is Invasion Plans, which says all creatures block if they're able to, and the attacking player chooses how each of those creatures blocks. This will allow us to not only prey on our opponent's creatures, but it'll allow us to single out those especially annoying combo creatures that tend to be a little on the smaller side. This is a risky card because it does allow all of your opponents to do the same exact thing. Finally, I think in the command zone, I'm going to put Thantis the Warweaver. Thantis is a 6 mana, 5/5 Vigilance Reach legendary spider that says all creatures attack each combat if able. Whenever a creature attacks you or a planeswalker you control, put a +1 counter on Thantis the Warweaver. This casts Berserk on basically the entire table, while benefiting directly from Trove of Temptation, forcing our opponents to attack us. Another trait that warriors gain from their relationship with berserkers is the ability to get stronger the more they battle. This can be represented with some self-healing, the building up of rage, or even the ability Minus Strike, which deals damage based on how much health you're missing. So adding some cards that benefit us from taking damage seems like an interesting way to take the deck. The main card I want to point out here is Rite of Passage. Whenever a creature you control is dealt damage, you put a +1 counter on it if they survive. This, combined with some of our other force combat abilities, allows us to make our creatures get bigger and bigger the more damage they take. There are a couple other special cards that I wanted to put in here simply because I don't really think they have a home in many other decks. One is called Angelheart Vial. Whenever you're dealt damage, you put that many charge counters on Angelheart Vial, and then you can trade the charge counters in for life gain and card draw. We can also add Anti-Blight, Bad Influence. Whenever a source you control deals damage to you, you put that many counters on Anti-Blight, and then you can remove the counters to deal damage to any other target. Now, this normally does require it to be a source that we control, but thanks to Rite of Passage, you can deal any amount of damage to Anti-Blight, and as long as she lives, she'll start getting bigger. She's also a flyer, which can be a huge benefit to us. Since we're benefiting off of damage to us and our creatures, I also think this is a very interesting deck for a card like Last Laugh. Whenever a permanent other than Last Laugh is put into a graveyard from play, Last Laugh deals 1 damage to each creature and each player. When no creatures are in play, you sacrifice Last Laugh. Thanks to Rite of Passage and Anti-Blight, we're basically guaranteed to keep our creatures while Last Laugh is triggering. We are once again dealing damage to ourselves though, so this is another risky card. But I think it has just enough synergy with some of the other effects that we want. The last thing I want to bring up is Reflect Damage. That is a trait that warriors get, so we want to represent it here, but it's not the same as the counterattack ability that monks get, so we're not going to focus heavily on it. We are going to add Indoraptor, the perfect hybrid, and Blazing Sunsteel, which is an equipment that gives us a damage reflecting ability. So for our mandatory checklist cards, we of course are playing the Warrior's Sword, and then I chose Summon Magus Sisters and the Earth Crystal. The Magus Sisters have 3 abilities that are all good for us. You either get +1 counters on a creature, making them bigger, you get a shield counter and gain some life, or the Magus Sisters themselves fight a creature an opponent controls. All things we want. And they're chosen at random, which is on flavor. I chose the Earth Crystal instead of the other crystals in these colors. They're all going to be good here, but I think if we're going to pick one as our mandatory crystal, it should be the one with the +1 counter synergies. So, there is a big problem with this deck. It is kind of all over the place. I think this deck can play Magic, but we are pulling from what feels like 3 entirely separate jobs to build this deck. I think if I were to upgrade this deck, I would want to focus on one era of Warrior to theme the deck around. If you want an equipment deck, if you want the classic Warrior basic fighter, the Godo's right there. Godo's there, Gilgamesh is there. You can build an equipment deck, throw Firion and Rauban in there, and have a good time. If you want the Power Break era of Warrior, you can probably build heavier into Infect and -1 counters with things like Evolution Sage or Contagion Engine. And if you want to force attacks and benefit from taking damage, you can add a bunch of indestructible creatures, Brash Taunter, all kinds of stuff that'll let you reflect the damage that you're taking from things like Last Laugh. This deck is also shockingly close to some infinite combos. If you use Rite of Passage and the Earth Crystal with a Walking Ballista, you win the game. So I don't think it's a bad deck, but I do think it's a little messy. But you'll have to tell me what you think in the comments below. Would you even want to play this deck? Listen, I love the Final Fantasy job system. It's one of the most iconic parts of the game, and it often offers you the flexibility to approach the game however you want. But I do feel like they really failed the Warrior for a long time. We went through almost half the game before Warrior was anything more than a standard melee fighter. And every character in the game could hit the enemy with a weapon. So what's the point of having a Warrior? That definitely made this deck difficult to make, but the video itself was also a little tricky. I did get pretty sick halfway through this month, and that affected my ability to record and edit any of this stuff. So again, I'm really hoping to get into a stronger workflow soon. But either way, I hope you enjoyed the video, and as promised, custom hero tokens, baby! These will go up on my Patreon for free. You can just download the files. I also put the template that I made up there, so you can use that to make your own if you want. I hope you enjoyed the video. I am still planning to make as many of these as I can. And I'll see you in the next one. Okay, bye.